What we're looking at are two photographs that show the importance of propaganda to the Nazi regime. In the first one, we're looking at Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, who was the Nazi Party's propaganda leader, but also became the Nazi state's Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. And what we're seeing in the photograph is them in front of the radio listening to the results of the 1935 plebiscite in the Saar region of Germany. Now, the event is not what's important here. It's the power of the radio that both the Hitler and Goebbels understood. Now, this is something that we see, growing in the 1930s. Now, when the Nazis came to power, Germany had a relatively low number of registered owners of radio. Radios were expensive. You had to pay a fee to the post office to own a radio and listen to broadcasts, etc. And in the Weimar period, political broadcasting was kind of not the thing. It was more for entertainment, etc. But the Nazis understood the power of radio to reach huge numbers of people. And what Goebbels did, for instance, soon after becoming Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, was to work with German manufacturers to create inexpensive radios for the German public. Now, this was a huge success, so that, many people, about half the radios sold in 1933 were these so-called people's receivers. That is, they were, relatively inexpensive, they had relatively limited range, but they allowed people to get broadcasts. And of course, the Nazis were also expanding the number of broadcasting stations so that more and more of Germany could get regular broadcasting. And Hitler, too, understood the power of radio. But he also learned in some ways the hard way. He shortly after becoming chancellor, he went into the studio to give a speech. And he did that, and it was a disaster. Because one of the things that Hitler as a public speaker was used to having an audience. And he had, he changed volume with emotion. There was a lot of, hand gestures, etc., in his public oratory. But in the studio, that didn't convey. And the technicians had a hard time trying to adjust the knobs to, for the surges and volume, etc. So he only made one broadcast in the studio that year, but he did 50 radio broadcasts that year, and most of them were in front of a live audience, which was a way in which you would hear the cheers and the shouts and the enthusiasm of the audience, when he spoke. And so he loved that. He craved that feedback from the audience. But radio, he understood the power of radio and how it would work for him. And this was something that politicians were starting to learn. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States, also developed his kind of relationship with this new media. But it also, on the part of the listener, the average German can say, hey, that government did something good for me. That I never had access to radio before. And they made it possible, so I feel indebted to them. And so you had this kind of way in which the Nazis used this way, this tool, not only to disseminate their messages, but to build public support. And of course, radio becomes an important tool, not only, domestically, but the Nazis see this as a way of reaching out to audiences around the world.